You know why? And I don't know if this counts as MMA math. 1 takedown, 2 takedowns, 3 takedowns, 4 takedowns, 5 takedowns. I think that might have been the 6 takedowns, 7 takedowns, 8 takedowns. Some of those might have been the same takedown. But he has at least 7 takedowns on our boy Sean Strickland, okay? You want to know what Hamzat did? Alright, so let's talk about Sean Strickland's history with wrestling. Especially when you look at how he performed against a guy like Rickus' Weston. Because this contact is absolutely critical for understanding his bad fighter claims against Hamzat. What we're hearing here really emphasizes something that can't be ignored. Hamzat's undeniable grappling prowess. And we're talking about skills that go even beyond what Rickus brings to the table. Now think about this for a second. If Rickus could take Strickland down multiple times, and then Hamzat went on to absolutely dominate Rickus on the ground, and completely control
that is fantastic. Because they're not doing that deliberately, they're not throwing it. That looks like it's set up, they're just supposed to do a green. I know it's not, but they're like when they do green screens on movies to make comments, someone's doing that there, like.
It actively changes the narrative of Strickland that thinks that Hamzat's eyes is indeed a bad personal insults and inflammatory comments are going to come face to face with undeniable proof.
Yeah, that's what I like about the gangsters. They don't give a shit to say about their personal. They don't care for that. Someone's going to say anything about their, like, their families and things like that.
He doesn't have the athleticism. He's got the dog, he's got the pressure, he's got the grit. But Hamzat actually has some good stand-up skills. He's got knockout power in his hands. He's got nasty wrestling. Next level.
Nasty wrestling.
I think we're going to see Sean Strickland on his back for a lot of his fights. I think Hamzat is probably going to wear him down with some ground and pound. As much as we hope for Sean Strickland to go out and make it competitive,
this segment really paints a vivid picture of Khamzat Chimaev as this almost unstoppable force of nature in the UFC. And I mean the commentator is laying it on thick with good reason. They're highlighting relentless pressure that just keeps coming at you wave after wave, his superior athleticism that lets him do things other fighters simply can't. His slick stand-up that's way more refined than people give him credit for. And most importantly, they're talking about his nasty wrestling and next-level wrestling chops that put him in a category all his own. When you start hearing predictions like Strickland's going to be on his back for a lot of this fight, and Khamzat is probably going to wear him down with some serious ground and pound, that directly undercuts any claim by Strickland that Khamzat is a bad fighter. For skills, the kind of gap that's really hard to overcome no matter how tough you are. And for a fighter like Strickland, who prides himself on his toughness, on his ability to push through anything, the idea of being worn down, of being systematically broken down over 5 rounds, that's not just a tactical concern, that's a deep personal insult to everything he stands for as a competitor.
Very deep, folks.
How will the fight go? It looks like a lot of people are just going with Hamzat automatically, but we cannot count out Strickland. I'm definitely not counting him on again. I made a breakdown about this a few years ago. About Strickland's chances against Hamzat. Probably the most difficult fight in this sport. I'm going back to that same opinion that I once had, because the person that just fought, Juan Hernandez, might be more difficult than people expect. He has good takedown defense, he has good get-ups, very good striking. He has no problem from Hamzat, but the thing is Hamzat's wrestling just having good takedown defense is not enough. This is probably the best wrestler in the entire UFC. Now, despite all the overwhelming confidence in Hamzat that we've been hearing, this clip offers a vital counter-narrative that we absolutely need to pay attention to, because it suggests that we cannot count out Strickland, not by a long shot. It challenges that bad fighter label by highlighting some of Strickland's often underestimated attributes that don't always show up in his solid getup when he does do that. And that jab of his that could legitimately be a problem for Hamzat. This isn't just fan optimism or blind loyalty talking here. This is a recognition that Strickland, while absolutely unorthodox in his approach, has developed a style that can be incredibly difficult to deal with. The kind of style that frustrates opponents and throws them off their game plan. The question then becomes, and this is the million-dollar question, whether his specific skill set, his particular bag of tricks,
is enough to overcome what's being described as probably the best wrestler in the entire UFC.
Get out there, get the work, get
We're
done.
talking about a
Get
true
back to
clash
message,
of
let's pop up
styles
and
and
we leave.
personalities. The kind of matchup that makes you stay up late arguing with your friends about who's going to win.
Next week, go for the A-Champ, because then we start doing it on the weekend, shopping on a Saturday or Sunday for the shop. Getting it all in there. We can also spend half an hour then if we do have some dinner. Doing like prep, do like tomatoes, salads, so as soon as we're walking, we're just walking in on there. Open shop there. But that way then we'd be on there for fucking 8 open plate. And then just doing the same in the afternoon, so go home at 2:30, go shop at 2:30, and then prep the morning after, like salad, tomatoes, the whole because then all we're doing in the morning.
Now let's talk about the back and forth in the lead up to this fight. Here's where the maiden personal aspect truly ignites, and it all stems from that legendary training technique that's become the stuff of MMA folklore. While the technical analysis of Strickland's Combat's wrestling path to victory is crucial for understanding how the fight might play out, the real fireworks, the stuff that's going to sell this fight to casual fans, comes from Strickland's claim that I made this guy quit, and I have people who could back me up on that. Let that sink in for a second. It isn't just about winning a fight in the octagon where there's rules and a referee. It's about claiming mental and spiritual dominance in a private setting, behind closed doors where nobody was watching. For Strickland to openly challenge Combat's pride and competitive spirit like this, put it out there for the whole world to hear, is an extremely personal attack that goes way beyond typical fight promotion. It's directly implying that Combat lacked heart, that when things got really tough and there were no cameras around, he folded. That's a far more damaging accusation than simply calling someone a bad fighter. You can improve your technique, get better at wrestling or striking, but if someone's questioning your heart, your very essence as a fighter, that cuts to the core of who you are.
Who knows? Maybe Witherspoon was going to be the one to gas that. But again, that's the point. We know for a fact comes out of struggles and trying to grapple busting around. We've seen that before, right? And on the feet, man, I'm telling you, if Strickland can survive.
Nuanced look at Khamzat's potential vulnerabilities. And this is important because it's not all doom and gloom for Strickland, particularly when we're examining Khamzat's cardio in those later grappling rounds. It provides a strategic blueprint for Strickland, a potential roadmap to victory that might not be obvious at first glance. The analysis suggests that if Strickland can survive that early onslaught, if he can weather the initial storm when Khamzat is coming at him with everything he's got, he could start walking Khamzat down in the later rounds, putting him on the back foot, just popping that jab consistently and making Khamzat fight his fight. This breakdown directly counters the notion of Strickland being a one-dimensional or bad fighter. Instead, it's outlining a viable path to victory that's built on endurance and boxing fundamentals, the kind of old-school approach that sometimes gets overlooked in the era of explosive athletes. It turns the bad fighter insult into a strategic challenge, flipping the script entirely and implying that Khamzat's perceived dominance, while impressive, has its own weaknesses that a smart, durable fighter like Strickland can exploit. The fight becomes less about who's more talented and more about who can impose their game plan and make the other guy fight their fight for 25 minutes.
All of a sudden, he has to rely on his striking game, and his striking game's bad. It's really, really bad. But again, that's kind of the thing here is that if he can just take down Strickland at the start of every single round and control him, then none of this matters.
But we're finally getting some big matchups. Khamzat Chimaev versus Sean Strickland was announced for UFC 328. That's a fight that I want to see. That's a fight that everybody wants to see. Chimaev versus Strickland, that's one of the best fights the UFC has made in a long time. That is going to be one of the biggest fights in UFC history.
This clip explicitly calls Khamzat's striking bad, and I mean really, really bad according to the analysis, which provides a direct counterpoint to any bad fighter accusations that Strickland might face from Khamzat's camp. It highlights what could be a critical weakness for Khamzat, suggesting that he must rely entirely on his grappling to control Strickland, because if this turns into a striking match, if they're standing in the middle of the octagon trading punches, the advantage swings heavily in Strickland's favor. But more importantly, and this is what's fascinating about this matchup, it positions this fight as one of the biggest fights in UFC history. Not necessarily because of rankings or title implications, but because of the narrative, the build-up, the sheer drama of it all. The irony here is almost the technical deficiencies that are being...
どうすれば
お前に選択肢などない。俺に従え。
嫌だ。僕にはやらなきゃいけないことがある。
やらなきゃいけないこと知るかい。うだうだ言うなら他を探す。お前は終わりだ。
他誰もいないぞ。
こいつ
悪霊だか死神だか知らないが、この体は僕のものだ。あんたの指示は受けない。
そうかよ。だったら力ずくで奪うまでだ。お前には消えてもらう。仕方ねえ。まずは付き合ってやる。だが忘れるな。お前の命を握ってるのは俺だ。あんまりダダをこねるようならお払い箱だからな。分かったら早く進め。
指図するな。
For those of you who have never heard of Time Splitters before, the series is about a band of warriors throughout history who have to hunt down a mysterious artifact in each period for an evil race known as Time Splitters. Through Time Splitter, the great cultural...
動きがぎこちないが、まあいいだろう。
So essentially, Assassin's Creed totally ripped their story off. Yeah. Time Splitters is all pose its fat, acting four-player Assassin's Creed multiplayer, and later on, online multiplayer.
そうだ。妹のところに行かなきゃ。
And for a brief moment, that's what looked like was going to happen. But no. So, what was the specific reason such a highly demanded cult video game sequel sought the action?
妹に会いに行く途中で事故ったのか？
僕の体を奪おうとしたやつに話す必要ないだろ。
それはそうだな。
あんたは何者なんだよ。
先にお前が話したら教えてやる。それにしてもひどい景色だ。ここまでとはな。
これが本当に渋谷なのか。
Yeah, but that was the same point for the fit, is that you just played without the soul, and not really like the secret, 3 or 4 different. Loaded more, but it used to be that way.
With Revolut, I can redeem airline miles from my Rev points, which I earn.
Perfect, I'd already done that.
なんだこれ。
物は試しだ。
Title aside,
触れてみろ。
many of you have probably never heard of Liquid Kids. But probably because it was a rather obtuse to arcade game that only ever saw the light of day on the PC engine. They could happen in Japan. Kidnap girlfriend rescuing, the blowing, and the war
お前でも力は得られるみたいだな。
There's a hippo in the game because his name is Hippo for some reason, and I've just broke my brain describing that. Good old early 90s video game development. So, Liquid Kid's biggest claim to fame is that it's the sort of sequel to the New Zealand story. One of the few pre-Sonic animal mascot success stories. That probably doesn't really mean much to anyone outside of Europe. Well, outside the UK and who grew up in the 1980s, come to think of it. But the New Zealand story was huge here for some reason. Like Super Mario 3 big. Heck, you'd be a Gaylord of Joey Deacon proportions at school if you didn't own it at the time, as pretty much everyone had a copy. It was on every system imaginable. It was even bundled with a couple to boot. Now, Ocean Software.
それはタイミングが悪いな。
病室は4階だったな。
So they threw their entire French subsidiary to full speed sports, and a year later, we were bestowed the sequential to one of the biggest video games out there. Except that never happened. So what was the stupid reason for the game being cancelled? Well, Ocean France developed and finished the entire game in less than 10 months. And in all that time, not a single person checked to see if they actually secured the rights to make it in the first place. And yet, it's a license without a license. Of course, Ocean could have obtained the license from Taito. After all, they were best buddies, so Taito would have obviously have said yes to them. But more lack of communication meant that Ocean France had only developed an Amiga port. And as the same as it was making the player games at that time, they but shut down Ocean France. The Amiga port was eventually leaked on in 2003.
ああやって体を失った魂を集めてるんだよ。
何のために？
あの世に連れ去るか、そのまま自分たちの餌食にするか。どちらにしてもあの魂は救われない。
止めなきゃ。
待て、あいつらはまだこっちの存在に気づいてない。見つからないようしゃがみながら背後へ近づけ。
Don't worry, I'm not going to fall into serious history again. You can watch that video to know all that stuff. Well, what I'm here to talk about specifically, they can openly the truth. They can tell you. Now, after the complete
恐れずにやることが重要だ。
Traeger tried the last ditch attempt to reconnect
お前も力の使い方が分かってきたみたいだな。
Sounds like a great plan. But when you see the planned list was Echo the Dolphin, Sonic Adventure, Rinse Hero, Toe Jam and Elm Street, Chacan the Forever Man 2, and of course, Streets of Rage 4, you can see Sega dive headfirst into development hell, with only Sonic and Echo coming out completely unscathed. But we're here to talk about Streets of Rage 4 again. And more so, why it was cancelled.
よし、いいぞ。
Well, Bernie Stolark cancelled it, as he has never heard of Streets of Rage before. I'll let that sink in for a minute. The president of Sega of America, the man
こういうところは稀人が多い。
one of 90's most loved franchises.
さっきから相手をしている化け物を俺たちはそう呼んでいる。
Now, you would have thought having a number 4 at the end of the title would have given away some indication Sega may have had a history of the series. But this is a photo of the name of the Sega Saturn.
今度はチャージショットを試してみるぞ。一気に引き抜いてやれ。これだけだ。今のは奴らの心臓みたいなものだ。
So if you go to the Xbox, you must have lost later, which never did. It was like, I think it's called Recall. It was like set on an alien planet. That's blasting aliens to steal their force from inside of it.
いるぞ。気を抜くな。霊的結晶体で補給をしておく。
Nobody fucking over here, I'm gonna go as well. No one stay home to down the way, Barbara.
And have now resorted to twatting their enemies